No bad deal, how you doing? Come on.
Oh no!
Give your projects a friendly jolt in Slack. Type it out. Talk it out.
Oh! I'm alive.
No bad deal, how you doing? Come on.
Oh no!
Give your projects a friendly jolt in Slack. Type it out. Talk it out.
Well,
I'm alive. No bad deal, how you doing? Come on.
Let me just.
Oh no!
Give your projects a friendly jolt in Slack.
It's quite enough of that.
Type it out. Talk it out.
Well,
I'm alive. No bad deal, how you doing? Come on.
Let me just.
No.
My God, shut up, you. I don't know if I can do this again. Let me just see if I can. It's quite enough of that.
Type it out. Talk it out.
That's very annoying. Anyway, my baby gorillas, what's going on? Is there any political issues in the UK that I don't know about? Let us just have a wee listen. And welcome, sorry for the delay there. Trying to change your lens is just an absolute nightmare on the camera or on the phone. So, I think that's us. I think this is us. Can't believe June, young Shoenhead, get married and had a baby. Oh my goodness. And then she was going to give up her political posturing. Oh, that would be a disaster. It was good to see her wake up to June this morning and find out she was married and had a baby, which was quite unbelievable. Let me just check the volume in this. It's quite enough. So, I think that's us. I think this is us. Can't believe June, young Shoenhead, and then she was going to give up posturing. Oh, that would be a and they say women aren't funny, man. She's very funny and a brilliant podcaster. Unfortunately, June and I, well, might not see eye to eye in everything. I certainly think she's great in the way that she presents her politics. Absolutely terrific. But apparently now married with a child, so congratulations to June. Here's UK A Force for Good with Humza Yusuf.
Look at me, so clean, no effort. Ponytail, ripped jeans, no effort. Face clean, go.
We do have a comment that he made here. Now, this is important.
Humza Yusuf is an embarrassment to Scotland, not including the fact that people are going out the second floor, third floor window with his brother-in-law, the amount of deaths up there in Dundee from drug deaths. It's just absolutely unbelievable.
This is Humza Yusuf's response to Southport. Our only response to the evil we witnessed in Southport should be an outpouring of grief for the children and adults killed in such a senseless attack. So straight away, it's like, that's the only response we should have.
Well, we don't know if it was a senseless attack or not. Let me just go back into this. I was having a bit of problems. See, it looks fine here, but it looks like it's not fine on the... Looks like it's a wee bit out of whack on this. So let me just see if I can get this a wee bit better. No, it looks okay now. Let me... It's funny how when you're actually trying to do this, the actual... I don't think that made it better. It doesn't actually... When I'm looking at it on the TV, it absolutely changes. Oh. So look at the gamma. The gamma doesn't look correct now. It looks like it's all off. I should do lessons on how to actually do this. Let's see what it looks like on the screen. Actually, doesn't look too bad, but it looks terrible on my monitor, my big monitor. Looks good on this. Let's see what it looks like on this. My goodness. So let's go into this. Yeah. Afternoon, Tim. How you doing, buddy? On my big monitor. Looks good on this. Let's see what it looks like on this. It looks fine there. It looks fine on it looks fine on the small monitor, but it looks absolutely terrible on the big monitor. I don't know if it's going to translate, but anyway, we're here now. Anyway, I don't know how it's looking for the picture quality of me is looking for you guys, but looks great in the laptop, but very bad on the big monitor. Let me know what it's like. So here we go. Let's go back to this. So this is UK Force for Good.
Is just crying about things. There's no suggestion there that we should actually do something physical to stop this sort of thing happening in the future. There's no thinking, how did this happen? How come people are in some way disassociated from their fellow man? How can we stop that? And how can we make things better? And is there maybe too much immigration and so on? No. Just forget all about possible solutions.
Alistair's correct. The point is that the powers that be are so lost in their globalist utopianism that the deaths of even children is an afterthought for them. It wasn't. There's people out protesting against racism, but the protesters against racism do not know if this was a racist incident. So this might be a racist incident against white children, and the anti-racists don't care that might be the case. The most vulnerable. So the anti-racists are the actual racists because they're quite happy to be racist against white people. And this is the difficulty. They are racist, but they're just choosing. It doesn't matter even if we kill your kids. We don't have to examine the reasons, such as the globalists let people in willy-nilly without checking the backgrounds. And we're allowing anti-white racism and Islamo-fascism to flourish. Who want to kill other people as well. That's why it was probably the demonstrations were probably targeted at Muslims, because they've already been murdering people throughout Europe, throughout the world for 1400 years. There's been 240 million people who have been murdered under Islam. Not to mention the mass rapes, the mass sexual slavery, because that's what it says in the books. But forget all that. A few people, white kids were murdered. It doesn't really matter. We don't really need to have any explanations. And if it affects our open door globalist narrative from Sir Keir Starmer, then that is your problem. You're the problem. It's not us. It's the problem. Obviously, as a globalist, if you're not on board with allowing your children to get raped and murdered, then you're a racist, a Nazi. And it doesn't matter what we think, not to mention some of the communists that are out who have murdered 100 million people. So 240 million people have been murdered by the Islamists. And don't forget that National Socialism came out of Marxism as well. All the leading protagonists in the National Socialist movement were either in the Social Democrats Party in Germany, which was Marx's party, or they were in the Bavarian Socialist Party, whatever it was called, who was in ties and links with the Communist Russian Revolution. Hitler was in a Jewish-led neo-Marxist organisation, and I think at some point he's flipped against them because he's rejected communism, which is very similar to the Islamists who want a communist world, and the Islamists want a caliphate. Both authoritarian, disgusting ideologies have murdered 100 million people. But they're not saying that the black guy or the African fella from Rwanda who murdered 3 white children was the racist. They're saying you're the racist for protesting against your children being murdered or raped or whatever it is that under the globalist utopia that they don't care about, but you're the problem.
Just cry about it. Okay, now that's a leader, supposedly a leader of men, telling us that's the only solution is an outpouring of grief. No, firstly, you're totally wrong when you say that. So he goes on and he says, if you use, and he's talking about the people who were kicking off yesterday, such a horrific tragedy to fuel bigotry, then you are the worst of humanity.
I think Hamza Yusuf is the worst of humanity. I think he doesn't really care about the guy going out the third floor window with his alleged heroin dealing, like Sarwar's family's heroin dealing in-laws, who are also murdering people through the use of drugs. He's not really come out and said anything about them. He's not come out with his false racist allegations. Hamza Yusuf is the scumbag. Let's not beat up. And anybody in the SNP that supports Hamza Yusuf, you're a scumbag as well. And why the SNP are named after an invading Irish tribe, I still don't know. Or alopecia for Alex Salmon's why is it based off, why is it called Alba, of the Irish thing? Don't get me wrong, the Irish, the Scots Irish, which means Irish, doesn't really, the Scots were an Irish tribe. And Scots Gaelic, Irish Gaelic is the same as Irish. So that's not indigenous. The indigenous language here is Brythonic, and the people who were originally here were the Britons. The Picts were probably a Brythonic tribe. There's a lot of mysticism about the Picts, but the Picts were probably just a Brythonic tribe. So the indigenous language is not German, which is English, or Scots Gaelic, which is Irish. And the indigenous population here are the Britons. The Britons of Strathclyde and down towards what's now called Cumbria, South Strathclyde. And they were here right across to Godalming, which is Edinburgh. And right up to probably all of what is now called the land of the Scots, which is probably not true. There are Scots here, both from the invasion and the kingdom of Dalriada, just like the Vikings invaded, just like the Germans invaded, the English. They all invaded just like the Romans invaded. They're all invaders, but the indigenous population are the Celts, just like the whole of the UK are the Celts, and the indigenous language is Brythonic. It's not Welsh, because Welsh means foreign, and the Welsh aren't the foreign ones. And just like Gaelic, although it's a beautiful language, and the Scots, actual Scots, have contributed a lot to what is now called Scotland, although it should be Northern Britain or Briton or Briton. And we should be learning Brythonic, not Irish Gaelic. The way learning Irish, they're not wanting to fit in. So if that means that this has been conquered by the Scots, and also culturally by the Germans, because we're as Britons, we are speaking German, or even in the Scottish Parliament they're trying to get Irish language lessons, but that's not the indigenous language to what is now called Scotland. It's Brythonic. If you think about William Wallace, Wallace I think was named after Welsh, which again is German for foreign. But what the reality is, they were the original. They fought against the Vikings. They fought, the Britons of Strathclyde fought against the Germans, fought against the Romans, fought against the Vikings. It was the Britons that fought. It wasn't like what do you call it, Braveheart, the film Braveheart, where they're all jumping about in kilts. There was periods where that was relevant, but it certainly wasn't from the Britons of Strathclyde, or should I say the Britons of the whole of what is now called Scotland. So yeah, that's something to think about. And also in Braveheart comes from when Robert the Bruce's heart was taken down to the Battle of Teba by the Black Douglas to fight against the Muslims, who were also raping and forced sexual slavery on non-Muslims in Spain. So that was the story of Braveheart. His heart was taken on crusade to fight against the Muslims because the Prophet was a rapist and had sex slaves, just like Hamza Yusuf says. So both the Labour Party in Scotland and the SNP have both voted for leaders who have sworn on the Quran, who have got a rapist and a paedophile for a prophet. The mass murder people, and mass murders anybody that's not in the cult. And both the doughballs in the Scottish Labour Party and the doughballs in the SNP have both voted for people like that to be in the party. We will never have, you couldn't be a Muslim in the party that we're going to set up, because it's antithetical to being libertarian and liberal. You couldn't be a Muslim, a practicing Muslim, and be in this party. Be in this new party. You could be a lapsed Muslim, or not a lapsed, somebody who has left Islam and be a member if they were in favour of a liberal democracy, but you couldn't be a Muslim, because Islam is a political ideology as well, and it wants to impose on others. It's a very crackpotty way of life. That's why that people don't understand it. People don't understand it because they've not read it. I understand it because I've read it, and so there's a lot of ignorance, a lot of ignorant people floating about there. When I say things, they don't actually know that I know more than they do. They think because they're living in their wee politically correct bubble that they're ahead of me, which they're not. They're too lazy to read it, so they don't know that the Prophet was a rapist and a sex slave called Maria or Mary the Copt. Mary the Copt was a sex slave. He then forced married her. So if you think about even Scottish people of Pakistani descent, that they can get forced marriage in Pakistan. The reason behind that, in the same way that Pakistanis inbreed, just like across the Muslim world, which means they have sex with their first cousin, which is one generation off having sex with your sister and one generation off having sex with your mum. So it's led to inbreeding. So if you all see Muslims like Hamza Yusuf, they're always angry, and it's not really their fault. It's because for 1400 years, because of the Quran, they've said it's okay to have sex with your cousin and inbreed. And that's why if you ever see a Muslim, they're always angry.
So the people who are throwing stones are the worst of humanity. The people who are behaving in an unruly fashion, attacking the police, they're the worst of humanity. Well, what about the person that actually went and killed children? And Basil the Great here down at the bottom says, do you not think the person who actually committed the attack?
No, they don't care. They just memory hole it. Oh, your 3 kids are dead? Oh, well, that's unlucky for you. That's a shame for you, isn't it? We don't really care about that. What we've got is multiculturalism and us sitting superior to you. And we've got some dickhead, absolute bellend like Hamza Yusuf in charge in Scotland. How anybody would put an X next to the box with an ardent racist? Elon Musk was correct when he called Hamza Yusuf a blatant racist, which is exactly what he is, against white people. So you're voting for your own destruction by voting for scumbags like Hamza Yusuf, Anis Sawa, and anybody else that calls themselves a Muslim. You're voting for your own destruction. You'd have to be absolutely retarded.
It's the worst of humanity. Good point, Basil. Good point. So people like Hamza Yusuf, they don't even see that. They're so blinded by their point of view.
I think he does see it, and he doesn't care. That's the point. When have you ever heard Hamza Yusuf talk about Muslim child rape gangs? When have you ever seen him say anything about the murders in Glasgow by a Muslim? The attempted murders at Glasgow Airport. You'll never get Hamza criticising anybody who is part of the Ummah, but you will get him criticising white people because he's a racist, he's anti-white, he should be kicked out of the country.
That they can't actually see what they're writing. Now, we also responded to this, and we said, politicians like you, Mr. Yusuf, who encourage our country to be invaded by dangerous people and who will do nothing to stop it, and who condemn those who speak out against it, are actually far worse because
And he's been elected, so somebody's gone along and put an X in the box that this absolute bellend is actually going to be good for Scotland. Absolute bellend, and the scumbags in the so-called Irish Notional Party have decided that this absolute prick is going to be, oh yeah, we need to get a bellend like Hamza Yusuf in. Well, I guess if you get a mass murderer like wee Nippy in, they allegedly, well, not really allegedly, but allegedly, Hamza's probably a refreshing aperitif.
it is upon your head that these murders fall. It is upon your head that these murders fall.
But he doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about making false racist allegations. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's already, as long as it's not affecting him and the kiddie fiddlers, he doesn't care.
And this is my point when I draw the attention to the politicians. They are the ones to blame. In a sense, whatever you may think about immigrants, they are the pawns that the useful...
That's correct. That's exactly right, Alistair.
...people that the politicians use. It's the politicians who can stop this. It's the politicians who can turn it around.
It's not the politicians. Listen, it's not the politicians that are going to stop it. It's the politicians that caused it. Well, let's get... Oh, I don't know if I can get Twitter up, man. Oh, I don't think I can get Twitter up. I was having a conversation with Craig Houston, and Craig Houston said to me that he said, and I understand the politics in Scotland only too well, and in every direction. I understand all of it. And he said to me that I said, Labour's, he said, oh, we got the SNP out, which he saw as a victory. And I said to him, this isn't a victory, Craig. This is the Labour Party voted for 80% of the laws that the SNP brought in Scotland. They are, including the hate crime bill. So Hamash Useless and Anis Sarwar are two cheeks of the same asshole, are all the rest of the clowns in both of these parties. There is no significant political change from the legislation that we brought in under an SNP government there wouldn't be under a Labour government. And the reason being is that they're both globalists. They both support the globalist agenda. They're both left-wing, extreme left-wing now for the majority of both of them, and they're both Islamist friendly or Islamist adjacent. So all three of these are anti-democratic ideologies. They're all separate, but they all combine. All three are anti-democratic and authoritarian. So again, as you'll watch Alistair again, it's not the far right, sick of hearing it. It's the globalists versus the anti-globalists, or the libertarians versus the authoritarians, and that's what you should say it. Not the left versus the far right. It's far right throwing things. What far was it when that African guy was murdering white children? Was that racist?
They are the ones that we must be addressing.
So let's see a wee bit more of UK Force for Good. Now, some of the things that I speak about, it might appear that I voted for unionism, which isn't necessarily true, but just now, unfortunately, because of the types of individuals that are coming through and the other political parties and the types of ideologies that are coming through, and either people have got a very lack knowledge of what it is, or they actually agree with it. There seems to be a lot of ignorance about political ideologies that hopefully we can shine some light on. Let's see if we can get this. This is it. Oh no, it's not. It must be here. Oh, it must be here. Where is that? Alistair. Where is it? Just seen it the other day there, man. Come on. I think these are his long form. So it must be in videos. Let's see popular. Know how many it got. Yeah. Oh no. Where did that go? Alistair, where did that go? It had about 1,000 views. I think that's maybe it.
Then you have to get with the program.
So, yeah, and Alistair's correct here. We sent in a wee comment to him, and he's correct that I'm correct.
Guerilla TV channel. Now, he does great work. Please follow him on YouTube if you can. He says politics are now the globalists versus the anti-globalists. I totally agree with you there. And a criticism that I would have of Richard Tice was I watched him today and he made this comment. He goes, we as at Reform want to be the main opposition to socialism. And I thought, Richard, you're talking language that's going way over everybody's head.
Yeah, and that's something that Reform UK has got to get on top of. Although Lee Anderson is basically the representation of the working man, I think that Reform are going to have to expand their their horizons into a lot of these 98 seats that they came second place all across England.
Okay, nobody cares about the word
Also 14 seats that were in third place in Scotland.
Socialism anymore, however you may define it. And some people who know about it like it. Okay, so it's not about socialism. It's about what Guerilla TV channel said there. It's about standing up for the nation against the globalists. That's the new dimension. Don't be taking it into, oh, we're fighting socialism like it's like 1977 or something like that. No, you're fighting globalism now, Richard. And if you don't see that, then you have to get with the program, because you will lose people if you go on about, oh, we're going to fight socialism. Look, in England, Reform came second in 89
got his figures round the wrong way there. 98 seats. Reform came second.
Constituencies to Labour. Okay, you want to be taking the Labour votes. You don't want to be alienating the Labour people. They came second to Labour in 89 constituencies. In Scotland, which is a completely different situation, Reform came third in 14 constituencies. Third in 14 constituencies. And that's in a country that's got 5 major parties. England's got 3 major parties. Scotland's got 5 major parties when you include the SNP and Greens. Yet Reform came third in 14 seats. And in 13 seats, in 13 of those seats, the balance was Labour, SNP, Reform. And so in Scotland, as in England, Reform is appealing to roughly the same demographic, especially the sort of demographic that voted for Reform in North East England. That's who's voting in Scotland as well for Reform. Okay, so Richard Tice, please try to develop a philosophy where you are attacking globalism, open borders. Forget battles about the economy, about whether industry should be nationalized or something like that. Everybody's got an opinion on that. That's not what's at issue here. What's at issue is saving our country from invasion and from being sold out to the world, being sold off to the world as well. So anti-globalism, that's what we're about, Richard. Okay, get with the program. I know you're the leader of it. You don't need to listen to Alistair McConaughey, but Alistair is correct when he's giving you this advice, okay? And it's for free.
Well, I think it was me that gave the advice, Alistair, but yeah, no, I don't mind. I certainly don't mind other people echoing and taking credit for the things that I'm saying. Especially, I don't. It's not a game of sides. This isn't. It's not like the football. You're not on a side. You're here to speak about the issues and get the best policies. So sometimes sides shift depending on the policy. Alistair, unless I'm you, I'm never going to agree on 100% of what you think or what I think. So you might not agree with me and I might not agree with you. It was interesting, I was watching the other day there, and people with super high IQs, that they had to change the actual rating of the IQ. So if somebody with a super high IQ went in and gave an answer, the person who was marking that answer might think that answer was wrong because they're not as intellectually, let's say, sophisticated as somebody with a super high IQ. So you're always going to be held back in that instance. So don't think that ideas are pervasive and good ideas, unless you're Nicola Sturgeon, where she just wants to kill people who were elderly to promote her ideas, where she's indoctrinating your children in through the schooling system, and both anti-white racism, globalist shills, global citizenship, the green agenda, a lot of bullshit. We can't do anything about the green agenda because India, China and America are pumping out the majority of the CO2. So if Britain disappeared into the water, it's still not going to affect the balance of CO2s. So it's a lot of nonsense. The deficit of £20 billion in the British budget, that £11 billion has gone in foreign aid for CO2, whatever it is, but that's a way of just laundering money from the state. So, all very interesting. What are you guys saying? You guys here? Are we here? Struggling after 2 little ones. I've got 2 kids myself. It's really upsetting. Sorry. Sorry, I'm sorry too as well, Tim. The good thing about the internet, it's still here, buddy. So that's a good thing. You'll be able to get it and watch it when you're free. But yeah, 10k current viewers, right? So let's see if I can stick it on. Let's see if that works. So much for being at the heart of the new government. This project was to be in the major part of Midlothian's benefit from South East Scotland City deal. Very short-sighted from the change in government. Axed £800 million Edinburgh University exascale supercomputer victim of Labour spending cuts. Right. Great. Thanks very much. So that's so much for Labour Party in Scotland. Escalating computing research, the estimated proceeding power of the human brain at neurological level, able to perform 1 billion calculations every second. Ambitious 800 million plans to create an X-scale supercomputer at Edinburgh University has been cast into doubt as a result of Labour government spending cuts. The funding was announced. Now, this definitely should have gone ahead. You should axed some of the foreign aid budget. However, the Labour government has reportedly shelved the 1.3 billion of funding pledged by the Conservatives for the major technology and artificial intelligence project, including the £800 million for the creation of an exascale supercomputer at Edinburgh. A further 500 million from AI research resources, which funds computing power for AI, is also to be affected. So they're already doing stupid things already. Absolutely laughable. Let's see if there's anything just now. So the likelihood is now, I'm new here. Yeah, hi guys, how you doing, mate? For Central Glasgow, nice to see you, buddies. Me too. Enjoy and soaking up some of the political knowledge. I like your points of view and take on things. That's good, mate. Just keep an open mind. Keep folk like me clued up on what's hot and not. That's it, bud. That's it. You've came to the right place. So, let's see. Protests. Here we go. So GB News, this was last night, the fellas down in Sunderland.
Wow, I just built the most amazing workflow on Monday.com.
You build your own workflow? What?
Now, police in riot gear have come under sustained attack as rioters set off fire extinguishers against them. This is a developing situation. Members of the crowd are reported to have chanted in support of far-right.
So, Keir Starmer is not commented on the riots when it's ethnic minorities rioting, like the Islamists down in Leeds. But he's quite happy to go after the white man. He's about to bring in a bill that discriminates against the indigenous population as well. Keir Starmer, I mean, I told you before, Keir Starmer is a scumbag. And so is the rest of the Labour Party. The Labour Party are full of scumbags.
Activist Tommy Robinson, whilst others shouted insults about Islam. Now, this, of course, is a point previously made by the Prime Minister.
Oh no, not the insults against a child rapist death cult. Oh no,
Mr. Keir Starmer, about far-right agitators travelling to certain places in order to cause trouble, including Southport, of course, in the aftermath of the horrific murder of 3 little girls. Cars in the city centre, as I mentioned, have been targeted by the group. Mounted officers pushed back demonstrators, some of whom were in masks, and locals in Sunderland have been told to stay out of the city centre. North East Mayor Kim McGuinness has spoken out. She said she was appalled by the scenes in Sunderland. Make no mistake, she said, if your response to tragedy...
But you don't take any responsibility for letting all these people in, so it's your fault, it's the Labour Party's fault and the Globalist fault that this is happening. It's not the first time this has happened. How many people have to die? 3 gay guys, not to mention the terrorist attacks in Manchester, where children being murdered there, the Glasgow airport attacks, nearly mass deaths there, the 7/7 mass deaths there, but the Labour Party don't seem, and the Globalists generally across the political spectrum, don't seem to actually take any responsibility.
Is to use it to commit violence, to abuse others, attack the police and damage property. You stand for nothing except thuggery. She goes...
Well, you just you stand for what you call diversity, which is basically ethnic cleansing through the use of mass immigration.
Don, you don't speak for Sunderland, you don't speak for this region. A cinema in Sunderland, the Omniplex, was also forced to close during the evening in the interest of public and staff safety. Look, this is a developing situation. Here are pictures of scenes of absolute carnage at this police station, razed to the ground, and symptomatic of what we've seen elsewhere in the country in the aftermath of that attack on 3 innocent girls in Southport. With me this evening, I've got journalist and author Harriet Sargent, former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, and entrepreneur and social commentator Joanna Jarju. Joanna, a nasty pattern is emerging here, isn't it?
Yeah, a really nasty pattern, and unfortunately, you know, this is one of the terrible...
But see, again, they're not really talking about the causes of the incident. They're the horrific murder of these 3 children, and my heart's with the families, but they don't address the underlying issue. They don't call the fact of a black man murdering 3 white children racist. They don't see that even as a possibility. There could be anti-white racism against 3 children. They don't see that as it doesn't even cross their mind. The problem is white straight men. So they're already set out who they think the problem is.
Well, things really about the development of social media that
Let me just, I'm going to move this up a bit, hold on. Looks a bit better. Where were we?
misinformation spread so widely, and I know that a lot of people will say, misinformation, what are you talking about? People are protesting about X, Y, and Z. But when we look at the protests earlier on in the week in Southport, that was triggered a lot by misinformation, and there would have been people, a chunk of people there who were protesting because they were just outraged and hurt and, I guess, expressing their grief in a different way.
So I think what has been allowed to fester is that we can be racist to you, we can kill your kids, we can treat you as second-class citizens in your own country now, and we're not having to bear any responsibility. But if you do anything to object against that, you're a racist, you're a Nazi, you're far right. Well, the Nazis were out of communism. Hitler was a communist in 1919. So Hitler was on the left, authoritarian left. You don't know if these people are far right or far anything. You don't have a clue what these people's politics. You've not surveyed any of these people's politics. I think you're trying to say that Hitler was like in the far right, or fascism was on the far right, when the reason that Antifa are so agreed with the fascists is that I think Giovanni Gentili, who was the person who was the founder, the sort of ideological inspiration along the same lines as Mussolini, and not Mussolini, sorry, Engels and Marx for communism. He was ideological inspiration, as was Mussolini was a socialist, and he was an anarcho-syndicalist. So he comes out the Antifa book. That's why the anti-fascists, who are actually just communists, are quite happy to be anti-Semitic, because they follow Marx. Marx was anti-Semitic. When do you see this? So this is Avi Yemeni, and I hope I can get this, because this was a really interesting thing. Live, I think it was live. So Avi Yemeni's Jewish. And he keeps getting harassed by, I don't know if this is it, let's see it. He keeps getting harassed by Antifa, who are meant to be anti-Nazi, yet these guys are targeting a Jew. I mean, you can write it.
Some crazy sounds in here.
Or I should actually clarify this. Fascism and National Socialism are not the same ideology. The Nazis, the National Socialists, murdered millions of Jews. In the Italian Fascist Party, there was 10,000 Jews. So even on that basis, not going in too deep into the actual ideology, it's not the same. Marx wrote the Jewish Question, and Hitler wrote The Final Solution, and these two books were related because obviously Marx had an understanding of Marxism, and just as Antifa, who are a combination of authoritarian, libertarian, communists, these are both anti-Semitic. In fact, the Islamists, the Marxists, and the Nazis could actually be in one group, and you wouldn't actually know. Don't forget, obviously, there was Islamists fighting for the Nazis in Second World War.
Anthony Albanese, he just doesn't dare stand on these very ugly anti-Israel mobs on our streets now. And the pressure went on him today to at least call out the disgraceful decision by the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor, a British Muslim, to seek a warrant to arrest Israel's Prime Minister for war crimes, along with leaders of the Hamas terrorist group, as if they were all morally alike. This was all that Albanese would say yesterday.
US President Joe Biden says seeking the arrest warrants of Israeli leaders is outrageous. Do you agree?
Well, I don't comment on court processes.
Pathetic. Now, today, Alexander Downer, the Foreign Minister, who signed us up to the International Criminal Court in 1988, said, look, Australia should now consider withdrawing from it if it does go ahead with these ridiculous warrants. And Opposition Leader Peter Dutton today would not rule that out.
In the first instance, it needs to make sure that there is moral clarity in our country, and that is to reverse the decision and to put pressure on the ICC to make sure that they reverse this terrible decision. That's the first instance, and then I think the next steps in relation to what you would take beyond that, I'm very open to.
Is what I've just shown here typical of them?
Sadly, firstly, thanks for having me, Andrew. Sadly, I'd say it's usually worse because on a regular week, you know, since October 7, in fact, up until this weekend, there haven't been many police around who are willing or available to deal with the thugs. So usually they would get away with the crimes, the violence, whereas on Sunday you saw police move in quite quickly.
And in fact, they arrested 6 protesters, and what I didn't see reported in the newspapers was all, as I understand it, were from the anti-Israel mob. Not a single protester from the pro-Israel crowd were arrested, and I think that says something about the behaviour. Now, Avi, I've shown before footage of another protest outside Victoria's Parliament, again involving you. You tried to interview a pro-Palestinian extremist who'd already been charged with kidnapping and torture about recent violence at that protest, and here is how he reacted to you.
I'm gonna get you. You're gonna what? I'm gonna get you. What are you gonna do? Leave. What are you gonna do? Leave. What are you gonna do? Leave. What are you gonna do? Hey, don't touch him. You came my way. You off. You understand? Stay out of my street. You came my way. Stay out of the camera. Why? You want me to show you? Get him up. Back off. Why did you come my way? Why did you come my way? You're filming this. This is Victoria, man.
But here is the police reaction to that clear threat to you.
The face of Hamas.
I don't get involved in that.
You probably should, though. He's out on bail for kidnap and torture.
What are you noticing about the policing of these?
So you can see that it's not just in the UK, that even in Australia, that this is actually happening as well. I mean, it's quite incredible, the lack of inaction. There was oh, here it is. This is it.
Back to Europe. Is that where I come from? Back to Europe. That talking point doesn't work because I'm from Yemen. Half of Israel is not from Europe.
I'm a Yemeni, from the Yemen, get it.
Europe, but that doesn't suit your narrative. The fact that we were chased out of Arab countries doesn't suit your narrative. You're half the man I am. You're not even half. I'm a quarter. Both of you will never have the heart I have. We're nothing. Okay? Now that we've gotten that out of the way and we can have a normal...
So, big shout out to Rebel News, and this is Rebel News Australia. It obviously started out with Ezra Levant in Canada, and Ezra is a lawyer, does some great stuff. He's been on Alex Jones. I'm very disappointed I've not been on Alex Jones. Especially the Guerilla TV channel was set up because of Avi and Alex Jones.
Conversation. Yes, I'm really scared of you. You have a big scary body.
Now that a real man is in both
You're
your
a real
faces,
man.
you can't do anything.
You got to get off the gear though.
Oh, okay. That's what it's about.
Are you on the gear?
Huh?
You're on the gear. Like you're going to deny that too. Well, you know.
Does that intimidate you?
It scares me.
I'm a real man facing you face to face.
I'm here.
In front of thousands of Israelis.
Because they'll never get violent. They're not like you guys.
By myself.
Because they're not like...
No, the cops there for their protection on mine.
The cops are here because you guys are violent thugs. Avi Mini for Rebel News outside the Victorian Parliament here in Melbourne, Australia. I'm here today to cover the rally against rising anti-Semitism, but I'm here a bit early because the other side...
I tried to tell Avi this, and I'm not quite sure. One of the things I'm very good at is political political science. As young Callum from the Lotus Eaters said, that it's not really science, but it is political theory. And although Avi's absolutely a brilliant journalist and does know about politics, he's certainly not ignorant about politics at all. He wasn't quite getting that Hitler was actually from a communist, and I don't think, unfortunately, he understood that. I think he just hadn't read anything about it. But I would go to TIK history, T-I-K history, and put in Hitler was a communist, and he will enlighten you, as Hitler was a socialist as well, as was the fascists.
The Jew haters have promised to come to disrupt.
So 3 ideologies that hate the Jews: National Socialism, communism, funnily enough, and also because even though that was written by a Jew, Marx, or somebody of the Jewish lineage, shall we say, and Islam, and especially Islamism. So these are 3 anti-Jew hating ideologies.
Up to counter-protest this rally. Let's go find out why.
Yeah, why?
Why are they here?
Why are you? Yeah, that's interesting. Why here at this time?
I think we were invited.
By who?
By you. It wasn't an open invite.
At 1:30.
I spoke to Simon.
Yeah. You're
Where's
welcome
Simon?
to come.
Yeah, I
You're
chatted
not part
with...
of the, what was the thing
protest
going on?
against
there was
the
a counter-protest call to protest against the protest for anti-Semitism. Were you part of that?
So you're not here for the counter-protest?
So the left are now protesting against a protest and against anti-Semitism. So basically the left are basically are working with the Islamists, and these guys are the new Nazis.
Protest, you're here to come 2 hours early to hear him speak. Is that right? Is that what you want
it wouldn't actually matter if the Marxist Leninist left or the wokey left and the Islamists who they seem to be in bed with, the GIMPs, the Globalist Islamo-Marxist party, were in bed as well with the Nazis as well, the actual literal National Socialists, because they're all anti-Semitic. So they wouldn't actually know very much difference when it came to policy.
To believe with the Palestinian flag.
An actual literal Nazi could pretend to be a communist and take over this grouping of Islamist communists.
2 hours early, and there just happens to be a counter-protest to the anti-Semitism rally. That's your story. Can you guys be honest about anything? I'll take that as a no. Why does the flag have so many holes in it? Is that to match the history?
So this is the actual Antifa. So this is actually the people who are meant to be anti-Semitic and anti-fascist, which they think is Nazi as well, but anti-fascist. And these people are calling coming down to protest against a Jewish reporter.
So as you can see, Antifa has shown up to counter-protest the rally of support against the rise of anti-Semitism.
So the left have come down to support the rise of anti-Semitism. So the Antifa left, the black box are basically the new Nazis. You can write it. So the people who are saying they're anti-Nazi are the actual literal new Nazis.
So get this straight, I know it's confusing. Antifa is rallying for anti-Semitism. I've warned you for years. That's where we've arrived.
Can you get your ladder out, lad?
Antifa around the world all the same. They've got masks. They've got a few chants. And
I'm not going to move.
Don't move.
You touch me, dickhead. You start touching people, we're going to have trouble.
Don't worry. Stay there. Stay behind him. Watch him. We're here. Don't let him. I'm not moving.
Near people, don't touch people.
So why are you wearing a mask? Cover their faces.
Keep it up. shit, dickhead. You keep it up, we're gonna have problems. What do you look like? Show me your face.
Now, the thing about the Hamas part of Palestine is that Islam is not a democratic. Islam is part politics as well, but Islam is not democratic. It doesn't believe in democracy. It doesn't believe in human rights. There's nothing democratic. It believes in murdering people and raping people. That's what it says in the books, and cutting off women's genitalia. So the clitorises in particular, they call it female genital mutilation. So hacking off children's clitorises, there's nothing democratic about it. So when Hamas got into power, I think they were democratically elected in. There was no more elections after that. So, because Islam is a theocratically totalitarian system of governance, it's basically a fascist theocracy, and so the anti-fascists are now supporting a theocratically fascist system of governance. I mean, you couldn't write it, you couldn't make it up.
Why you covered your face? Why are you going to cover?
So you've got the Islamists and the Black Bloc just the same. They should not be allowed. The police should take off their face masks, and they shouldn't be allowed to protest not seen. It's a direct threat, and not only that, Antifa should be put on the terrorist, as should some of the Islamist things. This is a terrorist organisation, but the reason Keir Starmer, because intimidates people who might not be on board with the globalist agenda, that's why Antifa has not been made a terrorist organisation, although they do use terrorism and violence to intimidate civilians. So they should have been prescribed years ago. But they're not being prescribed because the globalists use them.
Covered face. Why you got a covered face?
Come on, you second fella. Come on, you face.
What? Are you threatening me? You're standing for peace, but you're there.
Go. Let's go.
Maybe get them off the street. Look at them.
We just don't want you to get assaulted.
Don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. Look at them. Look at them. They got.
Yeah. So the police are on the side, so they should be the ones that get moved. They're the ones that are assaulting and intimidating people. The police are trying to move the journalists because the police are already bought and paid for, because the actual Antifa, the anti-fascists who are persecuting a Jewish journalist are on the same side as the police, who are on the same side as the, not pointing at anybody in particular, the people above them, which is the politicians, which is Keir Starmer. So this is a big setup.
Masks. That's why we have you here, and I'm grateful every time you're there. You jump in no matter what, who, when, why. I know I can do my job because I have you, and thankfully to the people at home at Protect.
Yeah, that big guy seems brand new. Well, I mean, that big guy seems awesome.
RV.com, that's where you can chip in for our security costs. Daniel is one of those security costs. ProtectRV.com. I can't do it without you, and I certainly can't do it without you guys either.
And it just shows you that acts of violence, the police aren't arresting the guys that are actually being violent to journalists now. So that just shows you, and it's happening here as well, that they will not protect journalists who are now, because it's getting too close. It's getting too close to the point of reference.
Thank you. Thank you. Look at that.
Harvey is a transfer.
Antifa of 2024.
Harvey is a transfer.
Look, there's Harvey.
Harvey is a wife beater.
You've got Islamists. You've got Islamists with that. That's the state of the.
So the reason Avi's saying that is obviously the gay guy that's shouting Avi as a transphobe. The Islamists will throw him right off like that up here, that building up here. So the good thing with this Antifa guy is that the Muslims give you free flying lessons right off the minaret. So like Gordon Jones as well, he'll probably get that from the Islamists as well.
Pro-Palestinian movement at the moment. Anti-Israel.
Which is intrinsic to Islam. It's in the books. They're not just pulling out their ass.
An unholy alliance where they have one thing in common: the hate for Jews.
Well, they also hate liberal democracies as well. Not one of them are democratic. The far left are not a democratic organisation. The Islamists are not democratic, and neither are the globalists, where 28 unelected commissioners are dictating a legislation.
I'm not sure exactly what goes through.
So, but Islam is fascistic. So this guy, but he's also now insulting a Jewish guy, and come out to protest against anti-Semitism. And that just shows you where the left and the GIMPs, the globalist Islamo-Marxist parties, are worldwide.
Through the head of these far leftists supporting these types of extremist groups, maybe they think that if...
So I'm with this guy, Morgan, big shout out to Morgan Jonas, Freedom Party of Victoria leader, well done. So there's a Freedom Party in Ireland, big shout out to them as well.
If they appease them, they might be saved in the end, but you and I know exactly what would happen to them under the rule of such a fundamentalist, theocratic type of governance, right? I don't think they'd be surviving too long. So the fact that they're protesting an event like this, which is literally standing against anti-Semitism, standing up for the Jews, not just in Melbourne but around the world who have been unfairly targeted, I think it tells you something very deep-seated about their intentions, and they are indeed the ones filled with hatred, and we need to stand against them.
So Nick, how does it feel to finally be on the side of the port?
Oh, it's actually really nice. There's no worry or anxiety. They're just going to bash somebody. And seeing the port use the same tactics they've used to COVID protesters and using them the right way, like actually going after people that are aggressive, beautiful. Happy with that. Happy with the police doing what they're meant to do. I just don't like it when the police target people for political reasons.
As you can see, police now moving on Antifa and the Islamists who came here to stand for anti-Semitism against the Jewish community. And this is the kind of policing we support here in Victoria, taking out the thugs who have been terrorising our city for now 7 months.
Excuse me, hey! Put the flag back! Put the flag back! No, that's not your flag. That belongs to us, and you have no right to it, and you have no right to this land.
Did you just tell an Aboriginal man to put down your flag? He's Aboriginal, Habibi. You're throwing money at a Jew. So classy. There you go. You see, these so-called Palestinians, they'll steal anybody's culture. They'll pretend like it's theirs. It's not his flag. It is an Aboriginal flag. And an Indigenous man here held what he claims to be now his flag. So Israel's his Indigenous land, and now Australia. Welcome to the Intifada.
There's no anti-Semitism here.
There's no anti-Semitism in Melbourne?
None.
Really?
Well, not from us anyway.
Okay, I didn't say you, but...
How about the genocide?
So do you stand against anti-Semitism?
You stand against genocide?
Absolutely.
Do you? Why is that?
Why do I stand against genocide?
Oh, with genocide. Oh, against?
I absolutely stand against genocide.
Never
bash a woman in my life. But since we're on the topic of women, why do you stand with gang rapists?
I don't.
So, will you condemn Hamas?
Do you?
Absolutely.
It's so targeted against you, isn't it?
What then? I reckon they hate me more than they hate Israel.
They do.
They care more about my fake...
I got a peace deal we can do. We'll give you Harvey.
They care more about my fake woman bashing than their fake genocide.
Yeah, stand here with this police presence.
Are you threatening me? You're saying that I'll get bashed?
This is the only way you'll come down and try and stand up for yourself.
So your argument is that because I'm unsafe to be alone, you told me not to come here alone. Why shouldn't I come here alone?
Hey, why haven't you responded to Hash?
Why wouldn't I?
Why have you responded to Hash?
Why wouldn't I come here alone?
Why don't you come respond to Hash's post?
Why did Hash blame Jews for firebombing his shop?
They did. Or Jew supporters.
How many women did you beat?
Never beat a woman in my life. Now since you care so much about women, do you condemn the gang rape of women on October 7th?
Of course.
Okay.
What gang
So you
rape of
condemn
women on October 7th? Do you have proof of that?
They literally filmed their crimes. Do you say so? They
You are a terrorist. I will not talk to a terrorist. I'm not going to talk to a terrorist.
You're talking
I'm
to
not
me,
going to
mate.
respond to you. You are a terrorist.
And by the way, guys, if you want to hear the real story about my personal life, if you're as interested as them, rebelfromthestart.com. I tell it all, the good, the bad, the ugly. But guess what? The ugly is nowhere near as ugly as that.
Why hasn't the pro-Palestine spoken up in regards to the children used as child suicide bombers during the Second Intifada? Why haven't they spoken up for the use of child labor that was killed by Hamas, by the way, to dig their tunnels? Why haven't they spoken up in regards to the children used as human shield when Hamas launched its rocket against Israel? It's disgusting. Like I said, I stand up for the truth.
What brings you here?
Right, I'll leave that. I've done a wee bit, quite a lot of that, but just a wee heads up for Avi down there, and you guys can have a wee look at that in your own time. What are you guys saying? Welcome, guys. Yeah, welcome. Yeah, that's good, buddy. Tim, you welcome him, mate. Laying out the foundations for the rest of the world to follow. UK likes to stay on the leading edge of things, like riding the waves. Are they treading like a blueprint for the rest of the world? Well, no. To answer your question here, guys, what's actually happening is that there's a global structure called the WEF, and they're laying down the foundations for the rest of the world. So it's being echoed out of the WEF, and they're setting the agenda, mate. So up Tim, Border Olympics UFC edition. Right, okay. So let's see if we can get. So this guy is a real wall puncher. So let's have a look at this. So let's look at the Telegraph. We'll look at the Telegraph. Does anybody else have any note to want to look at? A Nazi salute at the that's a lie. It's not a crime to protest. So
introducing LIBF, flexible learning at its finest. Study.
That's great.
To do their job, the wider community at Southport, the space to grieve, and time for the authorities in Mersey.
But him and his globalist pals in the Conservative Party and the Liberals and the SNP and the Greens don't take any responsibility for the actual situation that's actually happened just now. And I think what we need to do is actually toughen up the rules on self-defence. So if somebody had come in and killed that guy, they shouldn't have been charged with murder because he was trying to kill somebody else. So we're going to have to get exact rules on self-defence. If somebody's going about attacking people with objects or initiating attacks by touching people or aggressively touching somebody, then there has to be rules and tightened up rules in self-defence in Scotland as well.
Decide to do their job.
And what happens to a group of individuals like Muslims? So what happened recently was in Pakistan, a group of Muslims tried to attack somebody for blaspheming against a child rapist prophet. So, and they were like, because they're all inbred, we're all mad, because they're having sex with their cousins, they're not stable, mentally stable. So, because it says that in the Quran to do that, that's what Muhammad said to his I think it was his son-in-law or son or his somebody that he said it's okay to have sex with your cousin. But what having sex repeatedly with your cousin over 1400 years, it starts to engender defects, actual mental and physical defects.
There will be a time for questions, and we will make sure that the victims and families in Southport are at the heart of that process. That's the very least that we owe these families. But we also owe them
an apology for open door immigration policy. was this a racist attack? Nobody's actually even said this. Nobody on national TV has asked, is this a racist attack by an African guy on Indigenous children? No, nobody's asked that question. Nobody's even muted it. Nobody's even said, is this a racist attack? Because the Indigenous population are just meant to take it, while lispy pricks like Starmer just floats about thinking he's above everything. Oh, I'm above everything. I think he was involved in the covering up of Jimmy Savile. He was covering up in the grooming gangs with Gordon Brown, allegedly.
Justice. So while there's a prosecution that must not be prejudiced, for them to receive the justice that they deserve, the time for answering those questions is not now.
Yeah, but what you do is try and memory hole it, and I don't think people are going to be letting you memory hole it now. I think people are now, they've had enough, so they're not really interested in you memory holing anything now. So I think this was Sunderland.
Collaboration is key for team success. With ClickUp, you can easily manage your team's tasks and time.
So, as you can see, it's all getting a bit heated down there. So this was the other night, this was I think the time before.
Lost looking for answers at work? Find what you need fast with Slack AI.
It's quite funny how these same people, like the Antifa crowd, are now trying to target Jews and siding with Islamists. So it's really these people that are the fascists. I think it's just a play in words to try and deceive you. But it's quite funny that none of these are protesting with regards to the murder by a African individual on 3 white children, which might have been racially motivated, but these people are calling everybody else fascists. So that's very interesting.
Racist scum not welcome here!
But Islam is the fascist thing, but they've got the Islam, the Hamas stopped democratic elections because there is no democracy in Islam. It's a theocracy, it's a fascist theocracy. So, but these people are that stupid. Like, these are like, I think these are like retards, probably voted Labour. So these are like the retards that don't understand politics. Again, the Socialist Workers' Party. This is anti-racism, but the anti-racism is anti-white. So this is the problem. These are the far left. This is like the socialist workers. The word racist comes from the word Trotsky. Who murdered millions of people, Jewish communist Trotsky, who escaped and eventually got an ice pick in his head. But this is all communist propaganda, Black Lives Matter, communist, racist communism, which is Nazism. So these are all, these people are that stupid that they don't even understand what's going, they're actually supporting the Palestinian, while they're supporting the Palestinian, Hamas stopped democratic elections in 2016 and became a totalitarian, authoritarian, theocratically fascist system of governance. So these people are real doughballs, and they're calling other people fascist who are protesting against the murder of white children by a person who's not ethnically of the UK. So none of the stuff that these people are actually saying, other than they're just going through the motions of what they think is correct.
Officers have now identified themselves or station number.
Yellow flag, yeah?
What are you searching for?
Keir Starmer is wanting to bring in more anti-white bills that will discriminate against the indigenous population. So he's going to, I don't know, I don't think Keir Starmer's going to last probably in the next month. If these protests continue getting bigger up and down England in particular, yeah, it's going to cause a lot of problems. So these people, I think, are a bit crazy. They are actually racist, these people, but they're quite happy to be racist to other white people and malign them. So they're not out here complaining about the murder of 3 children. They're just out here complaining that people are complaining about it. So that, like Avi Yemeni, when we saw Antifa targeting a Jewish supporter, and against the protest against anti-Semitism, these people are out there calling everybody else racist. When the actual original spark for this might have been a racist murder of 3 children by a person who had emigrated here from Africa, a black person. But they don't even get the irony, because these people are actually racist. They just don't like their own. These are reverse racist. The white people here who are ethnically British are reverse racist, and Starmer's a reverse racist as well. Let's go back to the full interview with this doughball.
And I remind everyone that the price for a trial that is prejudiced is ultimately paid by the victim.
But you covered up Jimmy Savile. You covered up the Muslim child rape gangs. You did that as the head prosecutor because you're a scumbag.
And their families who are deprived of the justice that they deserve.
But why are they going to be deprived of the justice that they deserve? But you've already caused the problem through your open door immigration policies, because you're a shill for the globalists and the Nazi Klaus Schwab, son of a Nazi, Klaus Schwab. So you already covered up the mass rapes, and you're now you're allowing Sadiq Khan to do 2-tier policing, depending on if you're not from here, or if you are from here, you're prepared to brutalise the working class, while you're prepared to allow people who have come here off with the most heinous crimes. And it's not like where I would have it, it doesn't matter what your skin colour is. If you commit the crime, you're going to do the time. So that's that. But your policy is, oh well, these guys are far right and beyond the pale, but the Islamists who burnt down the bus and all that, we won't say anything about it. So that means that you're a racist. You're treating two people dependent on their skin colour with different policies and different tactics, which is racism. It's Nazi-esque, but certainly racist. But you think that that's acceptable? I don't think that's acceptable at all.
Supercharge your business with the all-new Shopify point of sale, the all-in-one.
Let me now turn to the actions of a tiny, mindless minority in our society.
So the specky twat who allowed covered up for the Muslim rape gangs under Gordon Brown, and didn't mention any of this about the riots up in Leeds. He didn't come out and do press statements about this. He's quite happy. He's not even talking about the murder, the potential racist murder of 3 white children. He because he's a scumbag, he's a Trotsky scumbag, that he's just talking about the rape of children. That's why he was bent. I think he was bent over, bent in his knee, or I don't know. For the Marxist group Black Lives Matter, which is a racist, Marxist, Nazi-esque group, because that's what the Nazis were, racist Marxists. But he's such a sellout scumbag, Keir Starmer, the lispy prick, that he would actually prefer to shit on his own people, because he's a scumbag, he's a traitor. All communists are traitors, and Peter Hitchens already identified him as a Trotsky, so he's already a sellout scumbag. He was quite happy with Uncle Albert to get in power as well. So they're anti-British. It's very important. The word diversity just means you're trying to ethnically cleanse through the use of mass immigration the indigenous population. It's a deliberate policy by him as a shill for the globalists, which is already on the record for saying.
Because in the aftermath of this attack, the community of Southport had to suffer twice.
Well, they had to suffer because you've been letting in anybody. You're not even checking who these young men that are just coming up in dinghies are. This is deliberately done by the globalists, whether it be the globalists, and it's been led, apparently, I just saw this as well, man, I couldn't believe it. So I didn't know if it was the housing, because the housing developers pay the Conservatives and probably Labour lots of money, so they have open door immigration, so that increases price housing because there's more and more people fighting for the same houses. I think it was in GB News. Wasn't 1 year ago. Let's see this. This is it.
14 years. You got the blame, and Labour ran this hard through the election campaign for crashing the economy because of the mini budget. I was one of your ministers at the time, so I take share of responsibility for that too. And there's this really interesting report from the Bank of England, and it now seems it was the Bank of England who crashed the economy. Can you explain what...
So again, we're being controlled by non-democratically elected bureaucrats. The Bank of England was almost privatised, but apparently there's shareholders that are getting paid dividends by the Bank of England, and we are not allowed as British people to actually find out who the actual underlying owners of this sort of privatised Bank of England is. So I think that really has to be looked at as well.
They have admitted to what it has admitted to.
So the Bank of England put out a report in May.
So the Bank of England undemocratically destroyed Liz Truss' presidency or premiership, and they adversely affected her, which I believe actually happened because the Bank of England's governor is an agent for the WEF as well.
With no fanfare whatsoever. It's available on their website. And what they demonstrate is that 2/3 of all of the market movement on gilts was down to LDIs. So this is the special type of investment that pension funds had been encouraged to do and were very, very susceptible to small changes in the interest rate. So the spike we saw after the mini budget was in fact down to these products that the Bank of England, who are responsible for financial stability, had failed to ensure were being properly managed. I mean, that's what happened. So they admit 2/3 of all of that market movement was essentially down to them.
And they lost a lot of money in their own pension fund on these instruments because of the movements in government debt.
That is true. And of course, lots of other major pension funds were invested. In fact, the UK had 60% of the world's LDIs held, partly because of the way that pension funds were regulated and supervised, which was the responsibility of the pensions regulator and Bank of England. It's worth saying I knew nothing about this. So when we put together the mini budget, which was fully signed off internally in government, we had no expectation at all that there would be this problem triggered. So we didn't know about it. And I'm all for politicians taking responsibility, but it's difficult to take responsibility for something you don't know about, that people who do know about it, you can't sack them, you can't change them.
So, yeah, that's because the Conservatives privatised it, probably because they want to outsource responsibility for non-accountable bureaucrats that you can't actually sack. So I would change that. That ministers could sack anybody, any bureaucrat that wasn't doing their job properly, and that would be point number one. The MP could just go in and sack a whole department, sack whoever they choose. Ultimately, the people who are in power have been elected to be in power. The bureaucrats have not. They should have no accountability to as and when they get sacked. There's obviously problems in the Home Office, the Foreign Office, and people should come in and get sacked in there, like in Westminster. I would bring in a bill to actually be able to sack anybody. But the reason they've outsourced the Bank of England is now controlled by the WEF and now can manipulate the markets and can manipulate even prime ministers because there's no democratic control over the Bank of England.
They are there. That puts a politician in a very difficult position.
But did we, in fact, make a bigger mistake? And that is that we didn't focus on trying to change the institutions, that we knew there were issues with the Bank of England and we knew that there were issues with the ABR. And we weren't willing to say the ABR must be closed down. It was just cut out of the discussion.
Well, look, I would have loved to close the ABR down. And I would have loved to make the Bank of England more accountable to ministers. But the reality is we had 2 years until an election. I thought the most important priority was getting the British economy growing. I thought we would have no chance of winning the election until we started putting money in people's pockets. And you know how long legislation takes. You were leader of the House. We would have not got the legislation through. In fact, we'd still be debating the ABR and the Bank of England 2 years later in the British.
So don't forget that Sir Keir Starmer, because he's a commie piece of shit, that he has stopped free speech in universities. People had been requesting free speech because a bunch of commie Islamists going through the people in these universities now, and people should be getting sacked out of the universities. We should just go through them like a total doze and actually get rid of departments, commie departments like gender studies and all that bullshit, and just go in and actually start sacking them. sack university lecturers. They should get it as well. So and they will get kicked out P45 than get somebody in that's better or more decent than the people that are in the universities now, which seem like a communist breeding ground.
The British public would be saying, what on earth have you been doing, Liz Truss and Jacob Rees-Mogg? You've been in the House of Commons changing institutional structures. Meanwhile, you're not getting on with the very important tax changes, regulatory changes that we need to make Britain work. Now, in a future Conservative government, of course, we need to sort out these institutional structures, and we need to be very clear about that. But what's happening today is Labour actually making the situation worse. If we struggled.
Let's look at how you can save when you lease an electric car through Business Contract Hire or BCA.
Because too much power had been handed over to unelected bureaucrats. They want to double down on that. I mean, it's amazing. The Chancellor seems to want to make no decisions about the economy. Gordon Brown handed over the power to the Bank of England over interest rates, and now Rachel...
Gordon Brown also sold off billions of pounds of gold as well.
Rees wants to hand over all the power on fiscal policy to the Office of Budget Responsibility. You might...
Who are not democratically elected, just like they want to hand over power to Brussels, where 28 unelected commissioners are dictating the legislation. These people are not democratic and certainly don't want to be held democratically accountable. These people are beyond the pale.
Ask, what is she actually there for?
And the OBR's record is terrible. I mean, year in, year out, it gets its forecast wrong, and yet it's held up as this body of wise people that comes up with unchallengeable forecasts. Have we got into this state? Is it that politicians have lost confidence in their own judgment? Because the OBR was obviously set up by a Conservative government. It's not the only example of a quangate. Natural England, the Climate Change Committee, these bodies that increasingly make policy, and the politicians just seem to sit back and let them do it. Have we lost confidence in our own profession?
I certainly think it's true that politicians have outsourced a lot of decision making. I mean, the OBR is particularly dysfunctional because the Treasury now doesn't have the expertise to do forecasting, so it can't do one half of the job. The OBR doesn't know all the inside details of what's actually going on in government, so it can only do half the job. You have a crazy situation, I saw this as Chief Secretary, where the OBR sends new figures every 2 weeks and suddenly £20 billion will appear and suddenly £20 billion will disappear according to the particular forecast that week. And that is no way to run a country. So what has happened is, if you look at Nigel Lawson or Geoffrey Howe, the great chancellors of the 1980s, they had full responsibility for monetary and fiscal policy. They decided, we're monetarists, we're going to focus on the money supply. What happened is when the Bank of England was independent, they independently decided not to focus on the money supply. So there was no measure of the money supply.
Because that allows stealing the people's money. It's a form of, well, I don't know if it's usury, but it's a form of increasing this money. It's basically where you take off parts of the gold coin to make another gold coin to actually inflationary. But it's actually a way of stealing your money, and that's why they don't want to focus on the money supply.
In their inflation model. But that wasn't a political decision. That was just a decision by the Bank of England themselves. So those decisions that had previously been made by chancellors,
who's electable,
had been outsourced, and we've seen that
to somebody who's not electable and may not be doing it in your interest.
The same now.
At least the politicians accountable. Who's accountable in the Bank of England?
Fiscal policy.
Now that it's been privatised.
With Jeremy Hunt, the former chancellor, saying things like, "Well, I can't, give duty-free access for tourists to London because the OBR telling me no."
So it's the OBR also that's wanting the mass immigration. I don't know if she's going to come to this. I might play all of this, but I don't. It's the OBR who nobody's elected them. A bunch of civil servants who that whole department could be got rid of. we don't really require, especially if they're not producing proper results and it's not effective for governance.
This is really important because the OBR's scoring, that is to say, the OBR's judgment of what a particular policy does, influences policies that you would have thought had nothing to do with the fiscal side. So mass migration is a policy that the OBR strongly supports, and there were discussions in government about this because people were saying, if we have an extra 100,000 people, that is X% on GDP, that reduces the deficit. And so the OBR was a major and malign influence behind the mass migration that we've had in the last 3 years.
That is completely accurate. And
did you hear that? Did you hear that? Listen to this.
An extra 100,000 people. OBR's judgment of what a particular policy does influences policies that you would have thought had nothing to do with the fiscal side.
So not only does the OBR get to manipulate the figures and decide on immigration, but the OBR is wanting, it's only interested in big companies, whereas the growth comes from small companies. So we don't want that. We want growth of small companies. We don't want these things to be tarnished, or not tarnished, stopped, prevented. We want growth coming from development of small businesses, as it's always happened in Britain, not large international corporations that have got no interest in the UK. That needs to go.
So mass migration is a policy that the OBR strongly support.
So the OBR strongly support mass immigration.
So there were discussions in government about it.
So a bunch of unelected bureaucrats are dictating their immigration policy.
This because people were saying, if we have an extra 100,000 people, that is X% on GDP, that reduces the deficit. And so
but they don't want to build up small companies, so they're trying to maintain their power and not build small companies which go into bigger ones. They want to prevent that, and then the side effects of the OBRs is the death of 3 children.
The OBR was a major and malign influence behind the mass migration that we've had in the last 3 years.
That is completely accurate. And they
Wow. So unelected bureaucrats are dictating our legislation. I think we'll need to have a deep dive into the OBR.
Share a worldview with the Treasury. So the Treasury has always had a view. It wanted to be close to Europe. It believes in high regulation. It prefers big business to small business.
So we're exactly the opposite. Small business, less regulation, and less immigration. So they're the 3 things that we would go right ahead. So if the bureaucrats are starting to butt heads against us, we'll sack them. Get a policy in that any department can be sacked. Anything, if it was brought forward that was going against government policy, sack them.
This is why it's been so tough on IR35. It just doesn't really like small businesses or sole traders. It supports
absolutely disgraceful
projects generally near London where they think
absolutely disgraceful. Absolutely. So that's why London's booming and the rest of the UK outside the M5 is not doing very well. That explains it. Well, we can't be governed by these people. We have to not be governed. We have to get our own stock market. We have to get our own financial services regulation in Scotland. We can't be governed by these people if they are basically wanting the ethically replaced London to have favourable treatments.
There are bigger returns. So the worldview of the Treasury is baked into everything the Treasury does, the OBR does.
Sack them. Sack every one of them. Sack anybody that's got that idea and it's not going to reverse it. Just go and go, P45 you're out, P45 you're out.
And the Bank of England does. So what you find is a Keynesian way of thinking has been adopted through government, and now it's very, very difficult for politicians.
Just get a bill, say the Prime Minister, the Minister in charge of the department can sack civil servants, boom, see you later, get out, fuck off.
To challenge that. And what Rachel Reeves is essentially saying is she wants it even harder for government ministers to challenge. And you asked me earlier, Jacob.
So unelected bureaucrats are now get precedence over elected ministers. That should never be the case. Unelected quangos have got precedence over ministers, and the actual policy that the populists want is getting overturned by civil servants, and they should be sacked. There should be a way of sacking them. If you don't do it, you're out. That's what would happen in our normal work. You're getting employed. Liz Truss was employed. She said, you're out. Sacked Addy, got in there, sacked the actual, the head of the governor of the Bank of England. You're out.
Why it was that ministers have outsourced these responsibilities. I think they wanted to avoid tough decisions.
Well, I think that's absolutely right, and we see that in the national.
But it's not just tough decisions; it also allows people who might be on the left or already compromised by the WEF to set up policies in counter to the wishes of the democratically elected members of Parliament. Just like the Tory party, the One Nation Tories, the globalist shill Tories, are all part of that larger group, which they don't represent the majority of Conservatives, as we've seen with 4 million people voting for Reform UK, and it's going to rise now.
National Health Service, where there's been a desire to hand things over to NHS England, so that you have some third party who decides whether to build a hospital or close a hospital rather than the Secretary of State. But it makes no difference because you saw...
The public still blame you.
That's what I was going to say to you.
Yeah, because you're ultimately responsible. That's why you should get rid of these quangos.
You saw this in the rule. So we now know that the Bank of England was responsible for 2/3 of the increase in interest rates. But you were held accountable for 100% of it and therefore left office within a few weeks. So the politicians don't gain from doing this. The bureaucrats, however, are secure.
Yes, and they've become more and more powerful.
Get projects in line in less time with Slack. Type it out.
And also politicians have used the whole independence of bureaucrats to attack other politicians. So further delegitimizing politicians and saying we can only trust the independent experts. We saw that a lot during COVID. We can only trust the scientists. We can only trust, the people with medical expertise. We can only trust the economists. And we know that economists' forecasts are almost always wrong. But it's partly a dereliction of duty by politicians, but it's also playing into the anti-politics mood. But the irony is, of course, the more power that politicians hand out, the even more they're despised.
But we were in office for 14 years. Not just your period of office, but people we like and admire, like Boris Johnson, were in charge. We had a majority of 80 at the end. In the coalition era, we had a majority of 70. Why didn't we do anything about it? What is our failure? Because before we can work out what to do next, don't we need to look at ourselves and see what we got wrong?
So what's happening inside the Conservative Party is that you've got a bunch of wets getting picked by the globalist shills who control central office. So even somebody who's quite base like these two cannot do anything because the majority of the MPs who control who's going to become Prime Minister are wets, globalist shills for baldy Dr. Evil. And Remainers, or whatever you want to call them, One Nation Tories, all meaning the same thing, and they're the majority in the Conservative Party. So these, and it's got even more pronounced now that a bunch of ringers, which we'll talk about later on or maybe tomorrow, that these people are controlling the Conservative Party, and they're on board with the what's happening, outsourcing to quangos, probably with their friends. So they're on board with it, and you can't overturn it. The only person who can overturn it is Nigel, and that's why Nigel should never switch back into the Conservative Party, because there's too many wets, One Nation Tories that could throw him out, overturn them, have the same thing that happened to Liz Truss by the Bank of England. He should always maintain the reform and grow reform to overtake the Conservative Party.
I think our problems go right back to the 1990s. They go back to the then Conservative opposition.
No, they've been a lot longer than that. What's happened is, since 1971, since the WEF has been going, they've been encroaching in various political parties. That's why we've got open door immigration. That's why we've got the things that are happening in our society, including the murder of these 3 children. That's why. And politicians, Ted Heath, I'm not sure about Harold Wilson. I think Margaret Thatcher went against it. Gordon Brown, but before that, John Major, Tony Blair, David Cameron, they've all been captured either by the One Nation, wet Tory, Remainer, globalist shells for the WEF inside and manipulated that way, or being openly and actively part of the globalist agenda. And being out of that globalist Remainer, wet open door, large large number of rules, little stimulation growth outside London, little stimulation growth for small start-up businesses. You've always been trying to hold everything down. It's totally unacceptable.
Essentially accepting Blairism, accepting the Human Rights Act, which has now made it very, very hard to deport illegal immigrants, accepting the Equality Act, which essentially embedded wokery into our schools and institutions, accepting the Climate Change Act.
Yeah, because the wets in the Conservative Party are the same as the Social Democrat, Keir Starmer, Tony Blair. They're all shills for the globalists. So that's why nothing changes. That's why the Conservative Party should be just left to be a One Nation globalist Remainer party, because all they're going to do is show their true colours, which is open door immigration, selling us out to Europe, and they should be left by themselves. So it's not a change of policy going from Sir Keir Starmer even back to a wet Conservative Party.
Which gave the power to decide carbon targets to another independent body, accepting the Bank of England Act wholesale, which made it impossible to move a governor on, or in fact for the government to really have a say over monetary policy. But
so the government can't get rid of a governor from the Bank of England. That's absolutely disgraceful.
We weren't around at that time. We maybe could have done more in 2010 to challenge the senior ministers at the time and say these are the things we really needed to change. But I think certainly personally, by the time I got to sufficient seniority to just see how bad it had got, how difficult it was to do things as a minister, it was too late. We'd run out of time.
And so if we look to the future, how is this going to be changed? Because
Nigel has to come in and change all of it. Nigel has to come in with people who know what their manifesto is and change every part of what's gone before.
As it looks to me as if it's going to become more extreme. I'm also interested that if you look at the King's speech...
none of that's going to change ever under a Conservative government.
King's speech could, 75% of it, possibly more, have been the King's speech of the previous Conservative government.
That tells you what you need to know, doesn't it?
Absolutely. In the budget earlier in the year could have been...
It tells you that both Labour and the Conservative are de facto one party, just like the SNP have been supported by the Labour Party on 80% of their policies. It's not a political choice.
Delivered by Rachel.
What are you guys saying? Are you guys here? Somebody here? Talking to myself? We can only hope. Yeah, mate. Ian, how are you doing?
Reeves, other than the 2p off national insurance, that you've got a political and bureaucratic system of which we have been part that seems to decide...
We have been ejected from it, Jacob.
Well, we may have been by the voters.
We're now by the voters.
Yeah. But I think the voters left in a lot of the wokesters, which have been picked in by central office, who are still now in power. So I'll come on to the disaster that's going to be the Conservative Party leadership election later.
By the voters who held us accountable for this failure, but they have voted us out, but nothing has changed. How do we get change in future?
Vote UK reform.
So people did vote for change. They voted for change in 2016. They voted for change in 2019. They were desperate for change by 2024, and we hadn't delivered change. And I've talked about what I think were the bureaucratic obstacles. There are other obstacles as well, such as Conservative MPs not being conservative enough and not being prepared to stand on their principles and giving in to lobby groups, whether those were environmental lobby groups or woke lobby groups, because they wanted to be popular at, London dinner parties. There were all those factors as well. What do we need to do now? well, we need to be the party of change. And we need to actually not just attack Labour for what they do over the next 5 years, and God knows it's terrible. Ed Miliband is going to push the prices of energy up to astronomical levels. We're going to see appalling levels of taxation.
Well, that's great then. But yeah, we're got a £20 billion deficit. We're going to send 10 billion of that in overseas aid. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Our public services are not going to be fixed. They're going to be made worse. We know that no roads are going to be built now. So the traffic jams we're all experiencing are going to get worse. But we can't just attack Labour. We actually have to say, this is the problem with the unaccountable bureaucracy. Here is what Andrew Bailey is doing wrong. Here's the lack of accountability of the Office of Budget Responsibility. This is the problem with the Climate Change Committee. We have to point out the structural failures in Britain so that we have, in the future, a mandate to actually change it. And I think that is our challenge.
And
that is our absolute challenge.
And this is what we've learned from our period in office. It's essentially learning from our mistakes and putting them into place. But we have to admit that we made mistakes in 2010 to 2024.
I think, yes. Tons. And I think not probably these two, but I think collectively they were that arrogant they weren't prepared to listen to anybody.
We absolutely did. And I think we can look across the Atlantic for an example of the way that Donald Trump talks about draining the swamp. It is the same issue that they have in the United States about the difficulty of getting conservative policies through. And I think one thing I did want to say is what we know is the bureaucracy is fundamentally hostile to conservative policies. Now, there was an incident in the King's speech where the memo personally criticised me and my government that was written by impartial civil servants. Now, that shows to me that there is a groupthink, there is a leftist groupthink within the bureaucracy itself. And I think we need to be very clear about that. There are too many Conservatives who think they can simply turn up, on the first day of a job as a minister, hand over the list of proposals and it will get done. I'm afraid that is not true. We now have...
So what you do is you hand over the list of proposals and you say to them, you bring in legislation to sack out any civil servant, including full departments, and they say, if this is not done, you'll all lose your job within 3-6 months, whatever the timeline. This should be timelined as well. So if you don't get this done and you ignore us, you're going to get sacked. So it's, here you are, do it. If it's not done, you're out. And that's what you do with the civil servants. Boom. And then just get other people in that aren't going to be obstacles to implementation of policy that was already being decided on by the populace.
A bureaucracy that is hostile on the whole. There are some good civil servants, don't get me wrong. It is hostile to conservative policies. And we've seen the Director of Propriety and Ethics, Sue Gray, is now the Labour Chief of Staff.
Indeed. Well, the London sewer was put in after the big stink. So I think draining the swamp is an appropriate analogy. Thank you very much.
Yeah, drain the swamp from the big stink. That's brilliant. I'm going to use that. So here's the list we prick. This is Keir Starmer.
Gang of thugs got on trains and buses.
Didn't call the people because he's obviously got the kiddie fiddler vote. So he didn't call anybody in Leeds thugs, funnily enough.
Went to a community that is not their own, a community...
Didn't mention any of that in Leeds.
The most horrific tragedy.
So he obviously now discriminates because he's a prick against the indigenous population, and he finds that acceptable. So he's a reverse racist. He is quite happy to discriminate against his own people. We'll see how long this lasts, Keir. I think you're on a shaky peg already. You've been in a month and you've been a disaster already.
And then proceeded to throw bricks at police officers.
And Leeds, they burnt a bus.
Who just 24 hours earlier had been having to deal
with potentially a racist attack on 3 white children, 3 indigenous children.
With an attack on children in their community.
Because of you and the globalist shells that have allowed anybody into this country, and they're deriding the justice system to let people away with actual crimes. So you've done this.
Their community. And make no mistake, whether it's in Southport, London or Hartlepool, these people are showing our country exactly who they are. Mosques targeted.
Well, the Prophet Muhammad was a child rapist, had sex slaves and wanted to murder people. Gays, non-believers, Muslims, Jews, Christians, anybody that's not in the cult, and you put them all over Britain, which is an alien set of beliefs to the UK that you've been okay with, which you've also covered up the mass rapes of children by Muslim child rapists all over the UK, and you did that while you were head of the prosecution in the UK. So let's lay blame where the blame lies, you Lispy prick.
Because they're mosques. Flares thrown at the statue of Winston Churchill.
Well, I think there was a guy standing beside it, the flare. I don't think that's really comparable. It's not really comparable to the fact that you let, you and your globalist shill pals let in a person who's now murdered 3 children. What about the 3 gay guys that were murdered by an Islamist in the UK? There's been tons of other people that have been murdered by Muslims all over the UK, but none of these people matter because you're actively discriminating against the indigenous population because you're a scumbag.
A Nazi salute at
the guy was literally waving. The guy was waving to one of his pals. In fact, let's just actually
From brief to build. Discover dozens of AI tools on Wix Studio.
Keir Starmer. Space to grieve. And time for the authorities in Merseyside to do their job. There will be a time for questions, and we will make sure that the victims and families... Thank you.
That is Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, taking questions from the media. He had a speech at the start. He said certain things. He certainly said you don't go to a protest with a rock in your hand. He said this is not protest, this is crime. Crime.
But he didn't mention any of this when they were burning buses in Leeds.
Is crime, he said at various points. Echoes of Margaret Thatcher there when she talked about crime is crime is crime. She said that previously in regard to something else.
But you've been letting anti-Semitic marches go through London with Islamists and communists for the last number of months, who are deeply anti-Semitic. So I don't really see the difference between their anti-Semitism and Nazi anti-Semitism. They've killed Jews as well, so I don't really see the difference.
He talked about a Nazi salute at the cenotaph. He talked about people he called thugs and far right. Those are the words of Keir.
You're part of far left, Keir Starmer. The far left have killed 100 million people. So yeah, fair to see. You've got to take responsibility.
Starmer talking about violent disorder and what has happened over the last while. One thing he didn't mention, and lots of you have got in touch about this, was Leeds. At no point did he, so far anyway, and we're keeping an eye on this because he's still talking, but we've brought you the majority of what he's going to say. He did not mention the Leeds riots at all. He mentioned the far right, as he put it, as he just...
Because he's bigoted. He's a bigoted individual. He is bigoted against the white British people. Salute, Cenotaph. I'm not quite sure he spells Cenotaph. Oh, it's nearly right. Cenotaph. Cenotaph. Police seize placards with Nazi-style imagery at pro-Palestinian protests in London. He didn't say anything about that. Said Nanti about that. This is Dan Grimes. What do you think? Did Sir Keir Starmer's doctrine speech Doctrine. Speech urging police to shut down the protest and use facial recognition made things much worse. Did Starmer's dismissive attitude and inflammatory rhetoric calling a concerned country tiny mindless minority inflame tensions? Oh, well, I wouldn't have thought so, Dan. Let's see, protest. So we've got an Islamofascist here. What's this woman saying? I don't know. She's all covered up in case. I believe they started to cover themselves because they were going to urinate, and that's why they had to cover themselves, because one of Allah's followers used to jump out and say, "Oh, I know who you are," and they had to. That's why they have to cover themselves. Bit stupid, if you ask me. So here we go. This is 1 minute ago. So it's not really, there's a lot of, in this, what's called the far right, there's a lot of ethnic minorities there as well, so it's not, I wouldn't think it's Hull. This is in Hull. This is another big demonstration in Hull, massive. All the protests, all the riots. Listen, the warning was there, not just the past week, but the last few years when those in the top decided that the UK can't be the UK anymore. Without any. And there's some lesbian with a Palestinian flag, although this individual would definitely be off the minarets. So I don't know what this is. This is a protest everywhere, breaking. This is in Bangor, Northern Ireland. They keep saying far right. Don't listen to that far right lie. Sunderland.
Yeah, sorry.
So they're calling them Nazis, but I'm not sure. It was like a black guy that murdered 3 children, so I'm not sure who the Nazi is. Maybe it's a black guy that was the Nazi. Mass Muslim gang MLD attack them. Yeah, it's getting closer and closer.
Right. In Ireland, there's a 50% increase in murder. In Sweden, 58% increase in sexual assaults and rapes by non-Swedish men. In Germany, a 92% increase in serious crime of newly arrived migrants. What we do need are some true statistics on crime, but nationality, not of the victims, but of the perpetrators.
I think there should be both of the perpetrator and the victim. I think that's important we get proper statistics.
But 90% of these unvetted migrant men. Albania. Have you seen Albania lately? There are adverts and holiday brochures advertising holidays to Albania, and apparently you can get a return flight from Tirana 28 quid. So why are all these Albanian men choosing to come and live in the UK, crossing a treacherous stretch of water when they can get such a cheap flight? And did you know that we have a company called Serco to thank, who are responsible for the invasion of Britain? They are facilitating fighting over 400 hotels around the country, who are responsible for that. We have a company called Serco.
Farco, yeah, Farco's getting paid by the Treasury, probably in connection with the Conservative Party and the obviously the non-elected bureaucrats that was set up by the Conservative Party, the OBSR or OBSCR, whatever it is, that is now being funded out taxpayers' money. Why are we funding to pay for foreign nationals to stay in hotels?
To thank, who are responsible for the invasion of Britain. They are facilitating fighting over 400 hotels around the country, but also the transporting of all these unvetted migrant men to all the towns and cities nationwide. Let's face it, after such a long, sometimes dangerous crossing on a dinghy, they're hardly going to walk to all their destinations, are they? Did anyone actually take time to consider how they actually get to all these various hotels? Did you know that when they arrive at their hotel, they're provided with the best halal food, the best medical care, and even given an allowance to live on? What about the people of the UK who are unable to get doctors and hospital appointments? What about our young people starting out in life who are unable to get a home of their own? What about our elderly now having their winter fuel taken away while these migrants keep warm in their hotels? This is all being funded out of our taxpayers' money. This mass immigration needs to stop. Our young people are being sacrificed to allow these undocumented strangers into our country. We do not know their intentions, their history, not even their real names. And Serco are allowing this to happen. So when your kids are too scared to walk down the street or go to the park, you know who to blame? Serco. Ask yourself another question. Where are all the women and children? Surely if there was such a bad situation and a war going on, it's usually the women and children first policy. Whenever there's been a refugee stream at any point in history, it's those that can't fight that leave. The men stay to fight for their country. Have a look on the map and ask yourself, where are all these war-torn countries that are all these migrant men are fleeing from?
Very good, very good.
Europe, an increasing crime.
Queen Natalie, very good. Protest breaks out again with men arrested as UK braces. Leeds protest. UK mobilised for far-right protest after third night riots. Yeah, planned protests begin across the UK after unforgivable violence is supported by Sir Keir Starmer.
Cenotaph. And so I've just...
So, to let you know, that was a guy, the guy that he's talking about was a guy waving. So they misinterpret and they deliberately allow the thing to actually be said. That the guy was actually waving at somebody.
Held a meeting with senior police...
And if there was an actual Nazi, he would probably be better with the Islamists and the communists. He would fit right in there with their anti-Semitism that we saw against Avi Yemeni.
Law enforcement leaders, where we've resolved to show who we are.
Yeah, we knew who you were. You're absolutely useless. Anti-free speech, just a show for the globalists. Pro-mass immigration, and the blood's on your hands, Starmer, you lispy prick.
That will not allow
You allowed the mass rapes of children by Muslim child rape gangs.
Understandable fear to curdle into division and hate in our communities. And that will not permit, under any circumstances, a breakdown in law and order on our streets. Because let's be very clear about this. It's not protest. It's not legitimate.
Didn't mention any of this about Leeds or any of the other riots. He only mentioned it if there's British people involved, so he's anti-British. He's just a self-entitled prick from... I'm not saying the guys in London are brand new, but he's just that self-entitled, middle-class, self-importance. He's actually made a law to prevent his pension being tapped up. His pension is so large that he's got a law, an act of parliament to protect his own pension.
Crime, violent disorder, an assault on the rule of law and the execution of...
Well, the assault on the rule of law was the African fellow murdering those 3 children. That was the assault on the rule of law. Yeah, you've allowed this to ferment. You've allowed this to happen. You've not enforced the law properly, evenly, or accurately. You were down your knees filleting somebody from Black Lives Matter, which is a neo-communist, racist neo-communist organisation. So you're a filthy piece of shit. You're a scumbag anyway. So nobody likes you.
Justice. And so, on behalf of the British people.
You don't speak for me. Don't speak for me, Starmer. You do not speak for me. So not on behalf of me. And a lot of other people. You don't speak for us.
Their values and their security to be upheld.
Well, what about the security of those 3 children? Doesn't really care about them. You haven't identified the motivation for this murder as well. Could this be a racist murder?
We will put a stop to it. I want to thank all of the police officers.
I think the thing that's going to be put a stop to is your rule. I really can't be bothered listening to him anymore. He's so obnoxious. The fact that we've got to listen to this absolute scumbag for the next 4 years, well, I don't think it is. In fact, I actually think if the riots continue, that he's going to be out quicker than Liz Truss. I think if this starts to accumulate, that he will be held accountable for exacerbating and aggravating the circumstances and the situations. And if it gets bigger and bigger, he's going to be the one that's held accountable. Even though he's probably wasn't for he's certainly accountable as a globalist shill for open door immigration. I really don't. I can't be bothered listening to him anymore. He's just absolutely sicking me. I'm disgusted. We can only hope. Question. Go on, Tim. What's the question? Do you have a right to call for a referendum on what religion the UK let in, as we are such a small country? No, but we should have a right to do it. Yeah. You could probably get a politician and a political party. We might do it as well. We might actually follow the Swiss model, so that you'll be able to ban Islam or people who follow a child rapist death cult from the country. That would be, for me, that would be completely acceptable. Where did we sign up for every religion to come in? We didn't. It was hoodwinked on us by lying politicians like Sir Keir Starmer and other globalist shill politicians that have been going about for the last 50, 60 years. They allowed this to happen. They've got a totally different agenda. It's not set out in their manifestos. They've lied to the British people, and unfortunately it's taken a long time for the British people to actually wake up to the fact that this is the outcome of what's actually happened. And I can only see Sir Keir Starmer. People were saying that Keir Starmer was going to be sacked before he even took over. I thought that's even fortuitous for me. That's even foresighted for me to be able to see that. But I can't see him lasting another couple of months. I think he's going to. He's been a disaster, and so have the Labour Party since they've got into power. They're an absolute joke. I could start taking them down one by one, man. Honestly, you know, I'm a garbage man anyway. So, this is what we'll start doing. I don't see him lasting probably as long as Liz Truss. I think he's already on a shaky peg for discriminating against the indigenous population, allowing children to be murdered, and not even commenting the children, but commenting the people that were complaining about the person that murdered the children. It's absolutely disgusting. He's a real piece of work. He's a shit. He's an absolute shit. I knew he was a shit before he got in, but he's definitely proven me right. Guys, love my baby gorillas.